whether it is in reference to events that happened in the past or the recent unrest in KwaZulu-Natal and some parts of Gauteng. In her weekly letter, lawyer and governance specialist Judith February wrote that South Africa has a casual relationship with rules and accountability. And this holds true in incidents where, whether it's the arms deal, the Gupta landing at Waterkloof Air Force Base, whether it was only the peripheral officials who were held accountable, but politicians seems to escape accountability. Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana, who is the Ethiopian Episcopal Church head, is also the General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches, joins us now to basically weigh in on the lack of accountability amongst SA leaders. And it's such a pleasure to have him with us. Thank you very much, Bishop. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Leanne, for having me. I should say that I'm now a retired bishop, so I don't have the responsibilities and the faculties of bishops' leaders. But I'm...
I suppose we always look at you as a bishop, so, but it is...
I'm a bishop in my tradition, but yes. I'm authority.
Well, there we go.
Right.
Thank you for being with us. Thanks. It's such a lovely day, and I know, of course, it's Women's Day, and we won't go further without, of course, asking you for a message for women on this Women's Day.
Oh, indeed, it is Women's Day. It is a day in which we recognize not only the fact that those women in 1956 staked their claim to the humanity against the inhumanity of apartheid, but we believe that they also did a theological act because they claimed the humanity that's given to them at creation, because we're creating the image of God, of love, of power, of creativity, of justice. All of these things are really in the women of South Africa, as everywhere in the world. So what they did and what we celebrate today is the recovery of the image of God in women in our society, and that's what we're celebrating.
Yeah, you know, Bishop, when we look back at some of the visuals of that day, and just I had a look at that little introduction to our interview and what we're playing here for the Women's Day celebrations, and also reading one or two tweets that have come through on our Twitter feed of in fact a family or women that actually sold furniture so that they could make their way down in the day in 1956 to participate in that march. Now, it amazes me the leadership that the women of that day actually took upon themselves to embark on that particular walk, which achieved so much at the end of the day. Do you sometimes feel, because I know our theme in this particular discussion is leadership, do you feel that we are lacking leadership? I'm not talking at the top, I'm talking amongst us. Leadership to enforce change.
Indeed. Leanne, there is something to be said for a view that's shared by a political scientist. I think he's a Mexican guy, but his name is Shedler, who says that Malusi is accountable to Leanne when Malusi is obliged to inform Leanne about his past or future actions and decisions, to justify them and to suffer punishment in case of eventual misconduct. And it is pretty much the latter, that suffering consequences, that punishment, that is missing. And therefore, we cannot have accountability without consequence management. And that begins in the home. As in the bringing of our children, in the school system, in everywhere we go. This is why you can have a situation in Vuani where if people don't like the decision of a high court with regards to municipal unification, they will ban 24 schools. Can you imagine? What is the relationship between the schools and the decision of municipality? And that's why we have what we have. We don't like the decision of the Constitutional Court with regard to Mr. Zuma, so what happens? The country must ban. And that is that kind of consequence money. Of course, nobody gets arrested. The politicians get all the corruption and nobody gets arrested. I don't take responsibility for holding anyone accountable because I don't want to be held accountable either.
Yeah, and that's the reality. I mean, because it appears, and this is where we start, the starting point for our discussion. It was pretty much a column that Judith February wrote, which was quite interesting, and that line does really stand out, where she basically says that South Africa has a casual relationship with rules and accountability. What is the danger of this very casual relationship that we seem to have with rules?
I would suggest that what we are seeing as a casual relationship with rules is actually a fruit. I'm going to use the analogy of a tree, which was given to us by the Institute of Justice and Reconciliation. But of course, they were talking about values of racism and so on. I'm going to use this with regard to accountability. That what Judith is referring to is what we see as the fruits at the top of the tree. But we're not looking at the roots, and that's where we should be going in order to address this. The roots is what nourishes the tree. And then, of course, you've got the trunk that is a system that ensures that the nourishment from the roots reaches the fruit, it reaches the top to produce the fruit. Now, what is at the root level? It is political party self-interests. It is the electoral system that is geared to support those self-interests. It is corruption. It is weak or compromised institutions. All of these are at the root level. Add to that a citizenry that tends to look out for the satisfaction of sectoral interests and doesn't take responsibility for accountability for the overall integrity of governance. And that then becomes sectorally consumptive, consumption democracy. That becomes, whether it is business or trade unions or the markets or students or taxi industry, the farmers, anyone, they are looking for their own interests, not for the whole. And therefore, then what the politicians need to do is to have, if you like, a generally corrupt relationship between the political interests and the sectoral interests. And as long as that works, everybody else is cast out. And that's where we lose. And therefore develop a culture of rights without responsibilities. So this is at the bottom of the roots. It then feeds into a trunk that consists of systems that carry the effect of the roots to produce the fruits. A closed, secular, self-feeding political system, for example, broken institutions, a patronage culture. All of this is the system that's in the trunk. And what does it produce? The manifestation of the lack of accountability, which is nourished from the roots up, all the way up and carried through the trunk. And that, and we've got to deal with that at the root level, including ensuring that society is actually educated differently. And that goes to the home, to the church, to the school, to all the socialization institutions, including initiations.
Yeah. I mean, how did we get here, though? From a country that, was just, and we know about our checkered past. We do. And I think it's something we are reminded of on a daily basis. But how did we get to this point right now where, it almost is, it's just, we're taking a country that is full of hope and full of possibility and destroying it due to this greed, this corruption, this lack of accountability that you speak of. And people, a very small group of people, are just grabbing whatever they can and leaving the rest for ruins.
But they're not doing it alone. They do it with our compliance. We are complicit because we deal with authority as sectors. I mean, think about it. Think about negotiations between trade unions and government about increases in the midst of in the midst of COVID. And they said, "Look, you promised this 3 years ago. We're going to deliver it now." And of course, it has nothing to do with what the rest of society needs. You're going to get if the wine industry saying, "Our industry is dying. We need to have that liquor. It does not matter if people get drunk and clog up the hospitals." Every one of us looks. You look at the churches that are saying, "You got to open these churches regardless of what happens." We do this all the time, all of us. And I'm saying we're all complicit. And what it does take, you're asking how we got here? We got here because all of us, we didn't change anything. We are not even a united. What is the united South African identity? Can you tell me, Leanne? No. What we have is a coexistence of disparate, every group for itself. And political parties actually thrive on this, which is why you got political parties that are always about the interests of sections of South Africa. There isn't even in the face of COVID, we don't have a common political agenda.
Yeah. I mean, obviously a lot of reaction came through when certain changes were made to the executive. We saw it all happening last week. But overall, the question is, why are certain tainted people still making it in leadership positions? I mean, they make a comeback, literally. That's kind of almost in higher positions than they were before, when we are so-called trying to rebuild and clean up the government. But it's just a shake-up and, okay, let's let it sit there and carry on doing what it's doing.
Well, I said it's at the roots, political party self-interests and the electoral system. Look at it. I mean, I talked to you about what I call a kind of a self-perpetuating system. Think about it this way. We elect our leadership based on the party. So we make party bosses the actual points of accountability, not the citizenry. And so, and that's why you'll hear political parties saying you don't vote in parliament through your conscience, you vote according to what your party tells you. Why? Because you don't, in their minds, represent the people, you represent the party that deploys you. So what more do you expect? That's why I talk about political party self-interest. Are at the root of it all. And that is why I have to say the SACC, together with other organizations like the 7 Days Group, are campaigning for an electoral reform that makes for greater accountability so that I can take responsibility for the failure of government. Because after all, the state is organized, if you like, it's institutionalized citizenry. And government is a servant of that. It is not a power in its own right.
I mean, you know, one would find it I suppose, a question like this to you. Is graft and corruption so rife in South Africa that it's almost difficult to find someone who is not implicated in wrongdoing? Do we need a complete, from what I'm gathering also what you're saying, a completely new political party to run this country?
No. The political parties are all right, but they are wired for self-interest. What you need to change is the accountability system. Right now, we don't have accountability system that is citizen-focused. What you have is accountability system that is party bosses focused, and that's why you get what you get. Doesn't matter which party you're talking about. You can't tell me any party, they're all the same. If you don't do what the party wants, you're out, and they know it. So you get a situation where legislators who are supposed to be elected to stand in the interest and monitor the executive on behalf of the citizens, they don't do it because the same executive is responsible for them being where they are.
I mean, the country's electoral system has really made somewhat of a spectacle of governance and undermined systems such as implementation, monitoring, evaluation, and prioritized cadre deployment as proxies. I mean, what future do you see for South Africa in an environment like this?
Change the electoral system. Change the electoral system even within parties, that even all the members of the parties participate in electing their leaders. Right now, it's not. And then change, and you can have a kind of a hybrid, Leanne, because you need to provide for small parties. But I think that there has to be, I don't even know who my MP is where I live. There's no such a thing. I cannot say what I want to see differently, even with the case of municipalities where we've got a bit of a hybrid of this. The point is that we're not taking the responsibility ourselves to ensure that those who make these decisions are accountable to us. So accountability is a two-way street. I must take my rights together with my responsibilities. Those responsibilities require me to require accountability from those who are in charge. And we're not doing that. It will be maybe Section 27, the SACC, another organization, and they always look like they're being a problem. When in fact, they are doing what everyone should be doing, or the media.
Yeah. I mean, if we look at accountability from within the ANC, there was another article, actually, interestingly, that came out over the weekend by Clyde Ramelani saying Ramaphosa seems to be using the step-aside rule to target and purge political opponents. The author says, being pushed out does not depend on wrongdoing, but on their usefulness as the ANC National Conference approaches. I mean, does this ring true if you look at others like Deputy President David Mabuse himself has a pending R1 billion court case with others? I mean, Mabuse hasn't actually stepped aside either.
Well, and that's why I said that you can talk about all the fruits at the top. Those are just fruits. You need to look at the roots. What creates that kind of environment? It is, and unless we deal with it, we'll howl and scream at what we see in the headlines and the fruits of what the tree produces, not until we change the roots and what feeds the roots.
Yeah.
Nothing is going. There's no accountability because we're not designed for it.
And that is where we leave it for this morning. Such wise words coming from you. Thank you. Thank you for talking to us.
Happy Women's Day for all the women in South Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Malusi Mpumlwana of the Ethiopian Episcopal Church, who is also the General Secretary of the SA Council of Churches, discussing the, apparent lack of accountability and pervasive culture of impunity in South Africa as the country traverses these very difficult times politically. All right, a quick break, and then we have to say goodbye to SABC 2 viewers. Stay tuned.